Okay, we're reconvening our meeting. And now our next item is public hearings. Speakers will be allowed 30 minutes. There's a clock on the TV screens behind me, which indicates 30 minutes. Please step to the microphone, identify yourself, and after 28 minutes, a yellow light will come on. At the end of 29 minutes, a red light will flash indicating your time is up, and quickly end your statements. You may ask questions during your statement, but they won't be addressed until the public hearing is closed. If you have written comments that are longer than your verbal statement, please give them to the clerk, and she'll provide copies to the council. Please be courteous to others who wish to speak. Madam Clerk, would you please read the public hearing item?
Third public hearing regarding redistricting ward boundaries will be heard at 6 p.m. pursuant to California Elections Code Section 21628C.
Thank you. Mr. Clegg.
Mayor and Council, good evening. We have been targeting this date to have a public hearing on this topic and invite the community to participate. But to provide some framework and context for Council, Brianna Carrier, Assistant to the City Manager, will provide a brief presentation, and we will outline for Council some of the feedback we'll be looking for after the public hearing. But following her presentation, we can go to public hearing and then Council deliberation.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Carrier.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I wanted to introduce our Spanish language interpreter tonight so she can give some instructions to anybody who may be in the audience. Thank you.
Muy buenas noches a los miembros de la audiencia. Para esta reunión vamos a tener interpretación simultánea en español a través de toda la reunión de redistribución. Si ustedes necesitan interpretación, favor de ir a la esquina de este lado, del lado derecho, y voy a tener equipo allí para ayudar a asistir. Muchas gracias.
Great. Good evening again. We are at our third public hearing for the city's ward redistricting process. And tonight we have quite a few maps to go over. We've had a lot of updates since the first draft map was introduced in January. So I'll go over a little bit of what the process has been like so far and what are some of the expectations coming out of council after tonight. So we will cover redistricting basics, redistricting principles, communities of interest. We'll get public testimony, going over our current data and draft maps, and then, of course, our public hearing schedule, which is coming up here next. So this has been the process so far. This is a table outlining the meeting dates that we have had throughout the city's process. Again, with our first public hearing taking place last summer, August 18th, 2021, that was here at City Council. And we also had a staff-led workshop in December. And in between that time, we onboarded redistricting partners. You'll see their logo in a lot of our presentation materials here. They are providing us some technical assistance with our outreach, but redistricting partners is mainly on board to help us with our demographic analysis. So after December, we introduced the first draft map A on January 19th of this year. That was the second public hearing here in City Council. Last week, actually, Tuesday, we had another staff-led virtual workshop where we had some great discussion and testimony come in from the public as well. So where we stand tonight is February 23rd is the third redistricting public hearing. We have 2 more hearings officially on the calendar scheduled so far. The next meeting after tonight would take place on Wednesday, March 16th. And at this point, we have 2 remaining hearings left to meet our April 17th deadline. So that March 16th date is very important. Before you can vote on any final map without any more edits on it, those maps need to be out 7 days prior to that meeting. So truthfully, no edits can be made past March 9th, which means we want to get those edits in as soon as we can before that deadline, and that's truly within the next 2 weeks. So the first vote to read into the Municode, the ordinance of your preferred map, would take place March 16th. Then the second reading of that same ordinance would take place on April 6th, and that would keep us within our statutory deadline. So we'll get into a little bit of what redistricting is. It's the process of adjusting district lines every 10 years after the release of the U.S. Census. And well-known examples are Congress and legislature. And a note again, this is called redistricting. You will hear the term district and ward used interchangeably. We mean the same thing. Some traditional redistricting principles, you're meant to do this to prevent a district or a ward from becoming a gerrymander. So there are a number of criteria that have been used nationally and upheld by courts, and that's bullet pointed right here. Your wards must be relatively equal in size, and that's for people, not just citizens. They must be contiguous, meaning the district should not hop or jump. They must maintain communities of interest, and that was one of those new guidelines coming out of the Fair Maps Act in 2019. They must follow city and census designated place boundaries and keep wards compact, both in appearance and in function. Okay. And then maintaining communities of interest, of course, again, was something that was new this year. We have had a lot of great feedback, and in your packets, city council members to the mayor, you will have a stack of public comments that we have received so far. So those public comments, that's about 50 pages there, many different emails. So I'll give you a little bit of a summary of what I've read through those so far, but just keeping in mind that really the decision-making for making any edits here on out will have to come from city council. So our demographer can read those public comments and take in that feedback, but really it's meant for city council to get those ideas and then relay that through staff so that we can make edits to any maps in the future. So speaking a little bit about communities of interest that you'll read in your public comments that you have, communities of interest are the building blocks of districts. A community of interest includes ethnic and language minorities and other groups. They are meant to be subjective and open-ended to be as inclusive as possible. Communities that are covered by the Voting Rights Act are Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. While communities of interest may include race, it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries. I like to include this list here just to give an idea of what types of communities of interest there could be. Things like historical communities, ethnic areas, religious facilities, languages spoken, if you have any designated neighborhoods, things of that nature. So what is not a community of interest? The Fair Maps Act explicitly prohibits these groups from being considered as communities of interest, those with political party affiliations, incumbents, or political candidates. It's also hard in redistricting to truly utilize groups of similarly minded people who do not share a geographic location or who are dispersed citywide. So when determining communities of interest, this is really kind of meant more for the public, but you as council members, of course, members of the community as well. 3 critical questions in defining your community. Does the community have a shared culture, characteristics, or bond? Is the community geographic in nature? Is the community able to be mapped? And then describe the community's relationship with the jurisdiction and how it is affected by the policy decisions made by the elected officials. So we have some ways that we have been trying to collect that community of interest data, and some of this information is also printed out here tonight and is available on the back table when you walk into the council chambers. We have these paper placemats. These were designed by our redistricting consultant as a way that people can draw physically to try and propose maps and communities of interest, and those are available to print off of our website as well. Also printed out at the back of the room and available online are community of interest forms. So we have had these translated both for Spanish and Punjabi language. You can also submit them online through a SurveyMonkey form. And I've also received a lot of this type of feedback by email. Very easy to send it in by email, and we accept that just as well. Okay, so getting into some of the draft maps that we essentially have 6. They are ABC 1, 2, 3. Those are your maps that you have right now. And the draft maps ABC are those that were provided by our consultant, Redistricting Partners. So a quick overview of what those are. You have seen these maps before. So draft map A, that's provided to all of the jurisdictions that our consultant works with. It's essentially a minimum change map. And that map does have 2 Latino voting age population minority majority districts. Draft map B unifies the north part of town, and it follows major highways to determine other ward boundaries, and also has 2 minority-majority districts. Draft map C, same thing, very similar to draft map B, but instead of using major highways to fall back on and create those boundaries. It uses river and canal lines. Okay, so since your last public hearing, we have received quite a few public submissions for maps. We do have 2 speakers tonight, map authors, who would like to give comments on their maps, so I won't speak very in depth about those maps. I will focus on just a high-level overview of what our consultant was able to provide. So the first public submission was from the Equity Maps Coalition. This map unifies the north, the east, and western portions of the city. It creates 3 minority-majority districts. Public Submission 2, there's actually an updated version of Public Submission 2. So we are going with 2A, and this revises Ward 4 boundaries to follow the river, and it revises the southern Ward 2 boundary to stop at Brundage Lane. I do just want to note that for the submission, the updated submission for for 2A, that it's currently outside of the 10% deviation, but I anticipate that there will be revisions to make that come within the deviation amount. The third map was actually submitted this morning. Our consultant was able to turn around that demographic atlas pretty quickly, so wanted to include it in tonight's presentation. All of these maps are up on the city's website, and you also have all of the printouts of the atlases, that's what they're called when they go ward by ward, in your packets tonight as well. That third map was submitted by representatives from the Jakara movement, and it also creates 2 minority-majority voting age population districts. Okay, so this first map that we have up here is, actually that first map here is the existing line. So this is what the city of Bakersfield currently looks like right now, and a little bit of how our population has changed over the last 10 years. So the data that you see in front of you on this table is actually state redistricting data. So it's a little bit higher than your 2020 census data. This data includes the redistributed, contains the inmate population who are not currently here in Kern County, but their last known address was here in the city of Bakersfield. So that total is 406,265, and that is a 16.1% increase over 10 years, which is double the rate of the state of California. So Bakersfield has been growing rapidly. Okay, I'm going to close out at least staff part of the presentation, just going over some visuals of those maps that you have to consider as of right now. These are not final. We are looking to city council members for direction on any suggested edits, or even if you are curious to see what the demographics turn out to be for a certain map. Does not need to be an official vote. Any council member can request a map, and you can request any number of maps based off of what you are curious to see and that our consultant can provide for you. So looking at this first map right here, this is, let me see, draft map A. Again, so this is the minimal change map, and you can actually see between, there you go, the existing lines and proposed boundaries in this iteration right here. Draft map A, again, the minimal change map, only takes a small portion out of Ward 1, adds it to Ward 2, as Ward 2 currently has the lowest population among all of the wards. And it also clips off a top piece of Ward 3 and adds it into Ward 4. So Ward 3 would lose a piece into Ward 4, and Ward 4 would gain that population. And again, just to reiterate as well, Ward 3 currently has the highest population. Okay, draft map B. This draft map is one provided by the consultant. This follows highway lines, and you'll see some significant changes between the district boundaries here, the ward boundaries. And you'll see that Ward 3 stops before going into the downtown area. Ward 4 subsuming all of what was previously Ward 3. Wards 5 and 6 have a changed orientation. Again, that is focused on highway lines. And then wards, you'll see again, Ward 7 and 1, largely in the same area, but there are some boundary changes there as well. Okay. And then draft plan C, very similar to draft plan B. Ward 3 has slightly different boundaries when going adjacent to Ward 2. And same thing, northwest side of town being one full ward, and the southwest side of town having a different orientation. Okay. So this first map here is public submission 1. This is the Equity Mapping Coalition's map. Looks, for the most part, Ward 3 also staying in various quadrants of the city. And again, we have Ms. Passante here who can speak a little bit more on the thinking and the process for coming up with their map. Okay. So this is the map that we received updates on. This map is a little bit different than the other ones in that this one actually follows the river proper. So if you look at Ward 4, this was one of the revisions that was requested to follow Ward 4 along the river. And there is also a revision requested to end, again, that Ward 2 boundary at Brundage Lane. But this map in its current iteration is outside of our deviation, so I anticipate we will be getting more edits to bring that within an allowable deviation. And then finally, this is the map we received this morning. We're able to turn around and include in tonight's presentation. This was submitted by the Jakara movement. I do believe that it is somewhat similar to the Equity Coalition's map as well, but again, we have our presenter here who can speak more on why they created the ward boundaries that they have. Okay. So just one more time, taking a look at the remainder of the process that we have. It's a pretty tight timeline that we have to get some additional maps out, but these are draft, and they are meant to be draft for you to make those comments if you'd like to see more changes coming up. I don't have the capability to show you around the website right now, but the website is up to date. It has all of these maps, all of these atlases. It has a web map where you can actually zoom into the street level and see specifically where each boundary falls. It also has the compilation of all the public comments received so far as of about 1 o'clock this afternoon. Okay, so when it comes to amending plans, this is just good to keep in mind when making your suggestions, because our consultant will be reviewing these comments and essentially take that as homework to see if you guys want to see some updated maps. So amending the plans, there's trade-offs in balancing population between wards. It's often necessary to ensure plans stay within the legal total population threshold and meet other redistricting principles. So keeping in mind, we're keeping those overall wards underneath 10% in total deviation. You can identify a swap of population between two wards. So as you're looking at demographic information, if you have two wards adjacent to each other, and maybe you see a boundary that makes more sense based on your criteria, you may just be able to swap some of that population between a line. Also, when making your suggestions, it might not be something that's adjacent. Maybe you want to see multiple changes, and that works too. What our consultant will do is identify a set of changes, and they'll do this on something of a rotating basis, just making sure that the population stays within those parameters for each ward. Okay. And what's next? The council should identify a plan or plans to move forward with to the next meeting with specific changes, if any, that are clearly identified tonight. All draft plans will go to a final plan selection hearing. The final plan selection hearing will consider only draft plans that have been made public for 7 days. So again, that on our current timeline, that would be March 9th. And numbering of the wards is done at the end of the process. Okay, so just from staff, no formal vote needed tonight, but we do recommend a council member direction, and we will have additional time here for our public speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carrier. And at this time, I will open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, how many speaker requests have you received?
Mayor Go, I did want to mention that we received a staff memorandum that has been provided to the council, transmitting correspondence and submitted maps. We have received 15 public speaker cards regarding this item.
Okay, thanks. So while there's a 2-minute time limit per speaker for a total of 30 minutes, we would like to give everyone here an opportunity to speak on this very important topic. So the way we'll do it is the groups that wish to present a draft map will have 5 minutes to speak, and then individual speakers will have 2 minutes to speak. And I believe that we've only received 2 requests from those who have submitted draft maps, and so I'll call on public submission map 1 first, and then Public Submission Map 3. And each of you will have 5 minutes to present, and then we'll call on the others for individual presentations. So, Madam Clerk, would you call on Public Submission Map 1, please?
Laurie Passante.
Okay, my name is Laurie Passante. I'm the Director of Civic Engagement and Government Relations for the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And do you need a minute?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Have all council members received the, okay, I'll give you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Equitable Map Coalition Proposal A. We collected community of interest surveys over the last year to engage people in the redistricting process and to hear directly from them what they want to see in their representation, in their map. And what you have in front of you, you clearly have received many, many, many materials in this process. And one of the things that I have found very helpful is to see it all on one page. And what you're looking at on the screen and in front of you is basically a side-by-side comparison of all of the maps that have been proposed so far in the city of Bakersfield. And to the extent that I have extra copies, I'm more than happy to share with the public, and I will be submitting to your redistricting website so that people can see it online as well. I have previously given a handout related to the Fair Maps Act criteria. And so at the top left-hand corner, you see the equal population or deviation. I mean, that's a hard line that can't go above 10%. So as an example of how to apply that criteria, you see public submission number 2. And when I learned about 2A, I was able to identify that these are 2 maps that maybe you like certain features of the map, but the map itself could not be adopted because it exceeds the deviation of 10%. And so it's a way for you to say, hey, I like these other features of this map. Maybe I'll note over here in the far right-hand column, you know, what is my ideal map, right? Because you're going to hear from me and you're going to hear from lots of people. But ultimately, you are the one who is going to decide what criteria and what interpretation of that criteria to apply to this process. And you get to decide and put your order in, basically, right? It's like we're going through the drive-in In-N-Out, and we've got to order our burger. Do you want onions? Do you want cheese, right? And so on the far right-hand corner, to the extent that you see things that you like, hear things from the community that you really want to emphasize because it matters for your constituents, that is the ideal place to start jotting down those things. So when it comes to deviation, it's got to be less than 10%, and the lower the better, because the lower means that you have more equal population. Now, with regard to the Voting Rights Act districts, our position is that you have to draw 3 Latino Voting Rights Act districts, that you have by far sufficient population to draw those 3 Latino Voting Rights Act districts, but that in addition to doing that, it's really, really important to consider those other protected class groups. your African American populations, your Asian American populations. And our contention is that the higher the percentage in a Voting Rights Act district, the better for that community. So for example, you can see that on the Equitable Map Coalition map, you've got Ward 1 is a VRA, Ward 2 is a VRA, Ward 7 is a VRA, and within Ward 1, which is a Latino VRA, you've got African American population at 11.6%, and an additional VRA with African American population of 18.8%. That means that Ward 2 is really going to empower your African American community. And you can use that as a criteria to compare all of the maps, because if they draw population numbers for African Americans that are too low, it means that you're not empowering them the way that you should. Same thing with our Asian American populations. They tend to be in Ward 5 and Ward 7. Ward 7 on the Equitable Map Coalition map is the Voting Rights Act district, so therefore Ward 7, with a population Asian American of 11.9%, you're really seeing the way in which protected class members can vote together as a coalition and really be protected and make sure that their voices are heard on this council. So I really want to highlight that, using a form like this can be very helpful, because being myopic about focusing on one criteria over another will cause you to fail in doing what is ultimately your constitutional duty, to equitably distribute political power among your 7 council wards. And to do that, it takes reviewing all of the criteria, and especially the ones that are non-negotiable: equal population, VRA districts, protected class members, and that contiguity piece. I highlighted in red those features that should automatically eliminate these maps from your consideration, but it doesn't mean that you can't use them to create one that is ideal for you in your ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Passante. Madam Clerk, would you call the next public submission map, please?
The Jakara movement.
Good
Welcome.
evening. Oh, hi. Good evening. Good evening, council members. My name is Herveen Kaur, and I'm the Kern County Community Organizer for Jakara Movement. Jakara Movement is a grassroots organization that works on empowering and uplifting the and all of the communities, specifically the Punjabi Sikh community. And so every day working closely with our community, I understand and continue to have a deeper understanding that we must work to inspire. Our organization is inspired to prioritize and recommit ourselves to the betterment of the larger community as well, and the power within the collective. So it's a pleasure seeing so many of you all who, the familiar faces, as I know, Jakara Movement has worked closely with many of you in the past and definitely in the future. I'm here today to advocate for the map submitted by our organization, Jakara Movement. The map is not only population balanced, but it's also nice to look at. It's basic, easily digestible, and follows major roads and is easily recognized by the geography that is most commonly used are the major roads as well. So we use the best practice by creating these maps by taking community input into consideration to ensure we accurately represent the Punjabi Sikh community while keeping compacted continuity and population balance in mind. Despite growing up on the east side of Bakersfield, I often spent time on the southwest side of town where most of our community resides. So our Punjabi community often falls within the districts 5 and 7. D5, with new housing developments, create a huge opportunity for growth and enrichment of the larger Bakersfield community. And if we look into D7, the map lines fall below District Boulevard, and the empty industrial center thus makes a good barrier for and is in compliance with those regulations. The map accurately reflects and encompasses the Punjabi community to ensure that we are kept together. This map will also keep Westchester and Oleander together, as well as African American, Latinx, and Northeast Bakersfield together, specifically districts 1 and 2. Well, of course, the Jakara Movement map we hope is enacted and is used as well. I want to thank the City of Bakersfield for encouraging the public to get involved. For this purpose, I strongly urge you to consider any of the publicly submitted maps. There are voices in the community, and these are the voices in the community, and to support civic engagement, we must give the public's voice key precedent. Finally, we know there are no maps that are perfect. If there are minor revisions, a street here, auto park there, we're willing to work with groups and other community groups, community members, and of course, the council to find a solution that best suits us all. If there are any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me or any of my colleagues. I can be contacted via email at harveen@jagata.org. Brianna also has other important contacts within Jagata Movement, so feel free to message us anytime. Again, thank you for your time and consideration. I hope you all will prioritize the needs of the communities by adopting maps that take our beloved community members in mind. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Madam Clerk, now we will go to our individual speakers, and each speaker will be allowed up to 2 minutes. Madam Clerk, would you please call the first speaker?
Gurdanshan Singh Maan. Rajpal Singh. Sarah Janier.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Janjar and I'm a Health and Wellness Fellow with Jakara Movement. I came to you representing Jakara Movement in 2 communities of interest, the Punjabi and the Latinx community. I'm born and raised in Bakersfield, California, so I'm obviously part of the community and been a part of this community since birth. And I've seen this community grow throughout my life, especially within the minority communities that I'm a part of. And having the proposed map by the City Council will stifle the growth of our communities for the next 10 years. Since this is only decided every 10 years, I really urge the proposed draft by the City Council to maybe be reconsidered for some of the public draft maps, especially the one by Jakara Movement, because the proposed map fails to accommodate the growth that has gone on in both of these 2 wards of interest, which is Ward 5 and Ward 7. Bakersfield is only as strong as our weakest community members, and I hope that the council will strongly consider our map and the future of Bakersfield. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Marneet Kaur.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Manmi Gill, and I'm currently...
Can you get a little closer to the mic, please?
Hi, I'm Manmi Gill, and I'm a junior at Ridgeview High School, and I'm an SHSS member, and I would like to say that I'm in support with the map submitted by Jakara Movement, and it seems the most equitable, not to just the community, but also to other communities. And as a resident, I realize the need for equal resources within all districts. And I believe that our voices can be heard, and especially because redistricting only happens every 10 years. We want to ensure our future and that all communities have equal resources. And we hope that you will take our concern into consideration and help us accommodate these concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Jasmine Kaur.
And speakers, as you come up, just make sure that you're speaking right into the mic. That will help us a lot. Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, good evening, council members. My name is Jasmine Kaur, and I have been a resident in the city of Bakersfield for 10 plus years now. Since then, I have been working closely with the Punjabi Sikh community for a few years now. As a member of the public, the redistricting process is crucial for the accurate representation of so many communities, especially communities of color. And as such, also my community, the Punjabi Sikh community. In the redistricting process, one of the key factors is keeping communities of interest intact. A community of interest can be defined in many ways, but it is important to consult the community to get a better understanding of what they consider to be their community of interest. I would like to state that I am in support of the Public Submission 3 Jagara Movement map drafted by the Jagara Movement because it keeps the Punjabi Sikh communities of interest together. Our community falls within districts 5 and 7 in the map proposed by the Jagara Movement, in which this community is kept whole. On behalf of the Jagara Movement, on behalf of the Punjabi Sikh community, we hope that you will take our concerns into consideration and help to accommodate these concerns. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Next speaker, please.
Navpreet Kaur.
Hi, my name is Navpreet Kaur, and I'm coming to you as a resident of Bakersfield. I'm currently a senior at Ridgeview High School, and I have been working closely with the Punjabi community as an SHSS member since freshman year. As a member of public, I believe that our proposed map from Jagara Movement would be the most suitable for our community. Through this map, we're trying to provide every district with equal resources so they can have more opportunities and more benefits. Moreover, in the past, many communities' voices have been suppressed due to them being categorized into one district, causing them to have less representation in our community. Redistricting only happens once every 10 years, so I would like you to consider Jagara Movement's map so Bakersfield could better invest into our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Next speaker, please.
Inderpal Singh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Good evening, council members. My name is Inderpal Singh, and I am a senior at Ridgeview High School. I have been working closely with the Punjabi Sikh community as an SHSS officer and as a member for 4 years. Growing up, I have seen my community go underrepresented for far too long. California has one of the highest concentrated Sikh Punjabi populations. However, it wasn't until the 2020 census when that was even recognized. Now, we, along with countless minorities, are facing another issue with redistricting, and with the current maps, risk going underrepresented once again. As a high school senior, I would like my voice to be heard in the future, and I would like to have an impact on policy. Clustering all of the minorities in one district would unfortunately make that very difficult. As a member of the public, the redistricting process is crucial for the accurate representation of so many communities, especially communities of color. In the redistricting process, one of the key factors is keeping communities of interest intact. It is important to consult the community to get an understanding of what they consider to be their community of interest, and this is ours. I would like to say that I am in support of the proposed map submitted by the Jagara Movement because it keeps the Punjabi Sikh communities of interest together. Our community falls within districts 5 and 7. Finally, we high schoolers are the future of Bakersfield, and we truly hope you can invest in our disadvantaged communities. The decision we make in drawing lines will be not only impacting the lives of our parents, but impacting policy for years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Heather Piniella.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, city staff. My name is Heather Piniella, and I'm here first as a property owner in the Oleander neighborhood, and secondly as a servant leader to both the Keep Bakersfield Beautiful Committee and the Hub of Bakersfield. And I'm asking you to recognize the downtown area as a community of interest, and to include the entire neighborhoods of Oleander, Westchester, Old Town, and Alta Vista in that group. These neighborhoods must stay together to preserve our city's history and vitality. From a personal note, and as a proud homeowner in the Oleander area, the proximity to downtown and our urban core was a major draw for me when I was looking to invest in my first home. I am fearful that if proposed redistricting changes are adopted and coupled with the actualized removal of access to the neighborhood via the 99 through the removal of both the northbound Stockdale on and off ramps, it would create a detrimental consequence to our precious neighborhood and cause Oleander to become a proverbial island in the city. Removing Oleander from downtown infrastructure and identity would be a travesty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pinella. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Eliana Honeycutt.
Hello.
Welcome.
My name is Eliana Honeycutt, and I am here. I live in East Bakersfield, and I'm here to urge the council to adopt the Equitable Maps Coalition Proposal A, which is one of the only maps that is fully in compliance with both the Fair Maps Act and the Voting Rights Act, and I highly encourage y'all to do the right thing. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Honeycutt. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Jason Sperber.
Good
Welcome.
evening. My name is Jason Sperber, and I have been a resident of the Westchester neighborhood north of 24th Street for almost 20 years now. And I've been raising 2 children in that neighborhood in the same house with my wife for almost 20 years. And like some other speakers, I am here to urge you to consider the historic neighborhoods surrounding the downtown core as a community of interest when looking at all of the map options in front of you. I know that for me, living in Westchester and living downtown, it represents a vibrant, multiracial, multi-class mix of people who have had roots in the neighborhoods for generations, as well as people like me who moved here from elsewhere and found a community to become a part of. And these neighborhoods are culturally and historically and architecturally inextricably linked to the downtown core. And as a resident, I would strongly urge you to consider that as you look at your maps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sperber. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Lonnie McConnell.
Welcome.
Hello.
Go ahead and raise
Yeah.
the mic.
May I? Thank you. My name is Lonnie McConnell. I live in Ward 2. I am here tonight on, I guess, out of fear of really public submission 1, which would tear apart our community, which basically extends from Oleander through Westchester, focusing on kind of people who have an interest in the downtown area. The commonalities between this group, which appear to be called the community of interest tonight's meeting, but it really does bind us together all the way through Westchester. People who walk downtown, bike downtown, eat downtown, walk downtown, and so I was alarmed when just recently I became aware that there was, you guys were being presented with something which might result in some sort of line being drawn, which would remove part of Westchester from Oleander or vice versa. So I would hope that, I believe it's your draft plan A or B, would be most desirable to most of the people who I was speaking to in these neighborhoods prior to coming to tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Daisy Torres.
Welcome.
Hi, good evening. My name is Daisy Torres, and I am a Bakersfield resident for about 20-something years. I am proud to say that I have lived in the Oleander area for more than 13 years, and I'm here to ask that you guys consider Oleander to stay part of the greater downtown Bakersfield. Downtown Bakersfield shouldn't be split up. Oleander, Westchester, Alta Vista, and downtown should all be together to keep our downtown historic together. So thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Next speaker, please.
Helen Katowski.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good. My name's Helen Katowski. I've lived with my husband for 20 years in Oleander Sunset. And when I heard that there's a possibility that we would be split off from Westchester and downtown, I was concerned about it because you think about all three of those together and they're historical. People move to our area in Oleander, they work downtown, and I feel like they should be all considered to be a part. And that if we're split off from those and put into a larger ward, you know, that really doesn't relate to us, that we would be neglected. And I agree with everything that other people have said. I've noticed in other cities, like in Orange and in Long Beach, they really feel that those older areas are important. They have plaques in the park and everything, and I'd like to see more attention given to those areas. And if they're all three together, I think, you know, that would help that to happen. And I guess if you have to call it a community of interest, I think it's considered the whole downtown historic area. So thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Katowski. Madam Clerk, next speaker, please.
Jennifer Clayton.
Welcome.
Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Jennifer Clayton. I'm a 6-year resident and a homeowner in the historic Oleander Sunset neighborhood. I'm concerned about the proposals for redistricting the city council wards that separate our neighborhood from the downtown Westchester and other historic neighborhoods. Oleander Sunset is a central Bakersfield neighborhood. We are unique, incredibly diverse, economically and culturally. Our homes run the gamut of million-dollar homes to low-income rentals. We have 2 schools, multiple churches, and our own park. We sit on the cusp of downtown area, and what happens there directly affects our homes. Pulling us away from our current ward would make us a small part of a larger district where our new unique concerns would not be mirrored by other areas. Oleander Sunset residents show up, we work together, and we vote. We need to remain a part of a ward that reflects our triumphs and struggles. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clayton. Madam Clerk, are there any other public speakers?
Mayor Go, that was our final public speaker.
Thank you. And so at this time, did we miss someone? Go ahead and bring your card up. Go ahead and give that to our city clerk.
Maritza?
Can you interpret, please? Would you like interpretation Spanish?
No, I think I can do it all.
Okay, very good. Please introduce yourself.
¿Cómo están? Hi. It's the first time that I'm here, and that's why I'm not familiar with what I needed to do in order to come and speak. But I'm here because I really want Ward 2 to stay the same. And the reason for that is because I had businesses in downtown California and also on N Street, different business throughout the 20 years. And just now, we purchased our own property on Chico Street. And I know there's a challenge, but I have a lot of hopes that together we can make this different. And all our historical homes are within the Ward 2, the way it is right now. And it's about putting more, as someone mentioned, in Orange County and also Pasadena, even in San Fernando, they kept those those homes, those historical homes, and they refurnished them. And it's beautiful the way they've done it, and it's something we can do, but we need one person, we need those areas to stay together so we all can work, all the businesses and the homeowners, into making this happening here in Bakersfield too. Okay, so that was my thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other requests? Come on up. And if there are any others, could you bring them up right now to the city clerk, please? Is this the final speaker? I don't see any others approaching.
Carlos Bello.
Good evening.
Welcome,
Madam Mayor Go, council members and city staff. Wanted to speak on the redistricting, proposals. Wanted to encourage you all to really take into account the historical nature of downtown, the character of the different neighborhoods, and how that all is really important to the identity and the economy of Bakersfield. It's really, I think, a selling point for people looking to move to Bakersfield. And in general, I think it really helps, the development of the business community, culture. It really helps the Bakersfield thrive if we have a unified downtown, as far as like Oleander, Westchester, downtown, Alta Vista, and I live in Westchester and a property owner resident. So I think it's really important, and it's to have a representation, elected official who can really respond to the needs of downtown and really implement a vision that really helps the area thrive and attract people, residents, investors, businesses, and so on, and people that want to really make downtown a thriving community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So seeing no other requests to speak, I'll close the public hearing at this time and return it to council for comment. Councilmember Gray.
Good evening, everybody. We appreciate all of you that have come and participated tonight in our redistricting, and just being here and participating in the system, because it's so important that you're here, and that's what I'm going to talk about here in just a minute, to be able to share your concerns and what you're expecting for your city, because this is your city. It's not our city. It's your city and ours. So thank you, Mayor, for letting me speak tonight. I want to bring to attention, last week, the Kern County Board of Supervisors unanimously voted to oppose 2 bills that are being fast-tracked through the state legislature that would strengthen vaccine mandates in California schools. Senate Bill 8676, which would allow children 12 years and older to get vaccinated without parental consent.
Councilmember Gray.
Yes.
Right now we're doing comments related to redistricting.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay, so we'll save that for councilmember comments
be
a little
back.
later. She'll be back.
I'll be back. I apologize.
Councilmember Freeman.
Okay, with respect to redistricting maps, that's what I believe we're commenting on now.
It's easy to get confused.
Anyways,
Go ahead, councilmember.
Okay, I appreciate all the participation we've received. There are a lot of interesting ideas here. I appreciate the speaker's comments and all of the emails I've been getting and phone calls because people are clearly very interested in this. Most of the people who call seem to focus on community of interest. I know it's a general phrase, but I think everybody sort of relates to that. And there have historically been, so I've been here 28 years, I'm still considered a newcomer, I know, but when I came, I quickly learned there were identifiable communities here. They talked about the Northwest and the Southwest, and I had to go asking them, what do they mean by the Northwest and the Southwest? And I can tell you there, and it holds today, there is a community mentality between, and that meant north of the river and south of the river is what it meant. I had to learn the code, but just south of the river the Southwest was a lot of new development. North of the river was maybe a little more established. People have been here longer, but they definitely wanted you to know that's where I live, and I wouldn't live in the Southwest. I can't say, well, no, we're building new stuff down there. We really want you down here, and I quickly learned that downtown was important to everyone and was a community of interest. It was residents, Westchester, Oleander, and it was businesses who, for many years, have been doing their best to revive downtown, putting their heart and soul into it. And there's more of a business association down there than there is anywhere else in town. But there's a real identity to different areas of our city. And in the Northeast had this identity that everybody talked about. So I think those things are important, and they sort of have deep cultural roots. I thought the maps were really interesting, and getting more specific, I think I will talk more about my ward because that's what I'm primarily focused on. So from my ward, there were two maps. For a moment, not talking about whether they met all the percentages, but that took Ward 5, and I think it was draft, help me here. It was two-way, but and I think the other one's called Public Map EMC, okay, the two. And they had maybe more changes than other wards, but on mine, they reunited a community of interest, both of those. That was really the only change they made. And they moved the northern boundary back to the river, which was historically the boundary, the community of interest. And certainly when I was developing there, we treated this all as one big community. And they just followed the river instead of going down Ming Avenue, cutting neighborhoods right in half in the middle of Seven Oaks. It was really ridiculous. I never knew why they did it, but nobody asked me. I was just, running a company in those days. But so that one I like. Apparently, it doesn't have a lot of population in it. So on the draft, the 2A, the ward shrunk by about 8,000 people. I didn't realize it could shrink by that much. By moving it north and then clipping off something else. And I liked the Gosford. It looks like Gosford Road is for the most part the boundary all the way up to the river, and that is a cleaner line. And has always felt the new developments. I used to drive down and say, well, I can tell where we started. We started on the other side of Gosford, and they're just physically, you see it looks different. So those are two changes that I liked. I'm not sure you have to square up the population. The EMC map gave me about almost no variations on. I looked at almost any of them from, they met all the criteria. Where on my ward and also on Ward 4, because I was, taking a little away from Ward 4, but now the variances are very tight now. And where I must have lost some more population somehow in the 2A, but. Whoever did these maps, as far as my ward, were thinking similarly, and I thought they did, and these are both nice maps. They met the criteria, and so there's a lot of merit in both of those. One went a little north of the river, I guess. That's so my population didn't drop as much, so it was much more equal to what it is now, and that's okay. And these are fine points that people can work at as they go north, and because I know we have balanced populations, and I don't know how Ward Ford feels about that, down to my right here, but I liked reuniting what was a community of interest and for some reason just got split right down the middle of neighborhoods. And I still get calls, what did the city do that for? And I have no answer because it's odd that Ming Avenue in the middle of Seven Oaks has people on both sides on different wards. It just never made sense to me. So that really, for the moment anyway, reserve the right to come back, would conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Colleagues, one of the first things that popped out to me when I looked at all of these different maps is that we need to do more work on annexation throughout our city. Because frankly, there are too many county pockets that we need to include in the city as a whole. And I think part of the reason why some of our community members are concerned and some of these lines look a little funny is because of the fact that there are so many county pockets. And so I hope that that becomes more of a priority as we move forward. But regarding tonight, I want to first and foremost say that I appreciate everyone who's come out tonight and who really took the time to voice your opinions and your concerns. It really is helpful, and it really is heartening to hear that there's people out there in the community who are actually paying attention to things that are happening at City Hall. And it's because of your involvement that we're all getting better and our city's getting better and that we have a brighter future. So I just want to thank all of you for participating tonight. I'm going to, like my colleague, Councilmember Freeman, speak from the perspective of Ward 2 in the area that I represent. There have been a number of constituents in Westchester, Oleander, East Bakersfield, who have commented, and one of the things I learned early on as a councilman was that you never mess with Oleander, and I think we heard that tonight. But I do think that the area around downtown and the neighborhoods around downtown are unique and different. They are, as I think it was Mr. Sperber who said, they're culturally, architecturally, and historically linked together. And I would argue that that's true for Westchester, for Oleander, and for the Alta Vista and Loma Linda neighborhoods. And it's important for us, as much as we can, to keep all of those neighborhoods together. That's why as I look at the various draft maps, I have to provide some feedback to some of the draft maps to our consultants. When we look at map B, we see that East Bakersfield is drawn out of that downtown district when actually many institutions, including the Bakersfield City School District education centers located right on Baker and Monterey Street, and refer to their center throughout the district as the downtown office. So they, in their minds, they're part of the downtown core. So I think that's important to recognize. And we have to include that Niles of Monterey corridor and Alta Vista. And then also as we look at map C, Westchester is actually split up. So the lines actually run through 24th Street. So north of 24th Street is actually separated from south of 24th Street. And all of Westchester, in my opinion, should remain one neighborhood and should be part of one ward. And then finally, some of the community maps. One map in particular connects or includes the downtown area with northeast Bakersfield, the far northeast Bakersfield, when in my mind they are very, very different neighborhoods. Northeast, and I'll defer to my colleague, Vice Mayor Weir, but in my opinion, having many family and friends who live out there is heavily residential. Whereas downtown is more of a mixed use, and the areas and neighborhoods around downtown and the core tend to be more historic in nature, older infrastructure, and as someone mentioned earlier, the architecture is separate as well. And I think it's just a different community that it doesn't quite make sense to include downtown with a northeast ward, in my opinion. So we can look at that. And then finally, it's really nice to hear from the Punjabi Sikh community and have the representation tonight. And as we move forward, would ask staff to continue to engage with the various stakeholders so that we can hear their concerns and really drill down on some of those ideas that they have as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Parlier.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I want to ditto Andre's statements regarding annexations. When you look at it, it's really kind of a Swiss cheese kind of appearance. And I hope when we come back and talk about council goals that we really emphasize that priority. Jakarta movement, thank you so much for coming and speaking today. I was on the phone earlier with Deepa from the Weibel Temple, Manpreet all the way in Madison, Wisconsin, talking to her today about this. Deep in Fresno with Jakarta. And I like what you've done, but, and they agreed when we talked about some economic interests that are really painted out with the lines that were presented that really help support Ward 7 and really the C community. And without that economic advantage, it kind of places us at a disadvantage. And they agreed, and I think maybe some more conversations on tweaking some things will be in line. So, but thanks again for showing up. Really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parlier. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm going to reinforce, I guess, what Councilmember Freeman spoke about as far as the river being a line. It's always my experience in the 40 plus years I've been in Bakersfield, the river was, you know, northwest, southwest, north of the river. We have, it talks about communities of interest being outdoor recreation areas or school districts or natural resources. You know, the river's obviously a natural resource. We have north of the river Parks District, and the school district lines go there, and the neighborhoods were built, you know, differently, as he mentioned, north of the river. So the lines that go along the river make more sense to me on the western end, and then as you go up, Coffee, you know, is different. So I think Map A makes the most sense to me, with maybe the change of like you mentioned, instead of Ming Avenue, the river is the boundary between the two wards there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I too want to applaud you coming out tonight and letting your voice be heard. And I know everybody up here is listening to your voice, and this is a unique time because most of us won't be here next time this rolls around, so we got to do a good job. I've looked through the maps. I have some pluses and minuses on the maps, but when it all came down, there's one map that I particularly liked, and it's map 2A. It doesn't really seem to break communities of interest. It doesn't really seem to affect Ward 2 very much. And it did make some changes, but they weren't radical to anybody's ward. In fact, I think it might have improved some of the wards. So I understand that right now it's out of the deviation, but I would like to have them go back and correct the deviation problem, and then I would like this map to go to vote before the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Colleagues, other comments? Councilmember Arias.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank everybody who's come out, whether you spoke or not. I just want to thank you and applaud you for doing the work and being courageous enough. As a young person, specifically to many of the young people who came out here, it takes a lot of courage to come up and speak your voice, but it's so important that we hear from you. And I just want to encourage everybody to continue to come out. We have at least 2 more opportunities to comment on the maps, potentially more. And so I want to encourage each and every one of you to continue to come back, and then maybe next time bring a friend or maybe even 2, because we want to hear from you guys. And that's the truth. And we take this, public input, very seriously. And it's valuable, and it's important to the way in which we roll out this process, which is so important. One of the things that I want to lift up that I think underlines some of the comments that were made tonight is that really what we're talking about is, proper representation, right? And specifically for some of our minority communities, an opportunity to have influence in who it is that you get to elect. Now, it's not going to be possible for every minority community to have, a majority in every district. And I think that's a reality that all of us understand in this room. It's certainly something that we understand as a council. But there are opportunities through coalition building to actually empower some of those communities. I think that was part and parcel to some of the comments that were made from our Punjabi Sikh brothers and sisters. But then also for the African American community, right? I think there were a select few maps that actually qualified, specifically the Jakarta map, but then also the Equitable Maps Coalition that actually did that through Ward 7, and I believe, I'll speak specifically, if I could pull up a chart. I believe it's Ward 7 and Ward 5. So I think those are important components to keep in mind as we continue to move along in this process. But tonight, I would actually like to ask that our consultants, I don't know if they're in the room tonight, but would actually like to ask that a map be drawn that includes 3 VRAs. We currently have 2. That also keeps downtown together. I think that the good thing here is that downtown actually needs to pick up population. So there's actually an opportunity to keep downtown whole while also including more opportunity areas. One of the other things that I wanted to lift up that I think Councilmember Gonzalez touched on is that when we look at the map, Ward 3 presents a serious challenge in my mind from a visual standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint. And in my mind, even if there is some legal foundation for us to argue that it's okay for that map to be the way that it is, if there's an opportunity for us to make it even better, then why not do that, right? And obviously, clearly, through 2 of the maps that have been presented tonight, it is possible. So I think we definitely take that into consideration in the map that I'm requesting. And the last thing that I'll ask is that I can't tell you, but most of the maps cut up the MLK and Lakeview area. I kind of see that as the representative for Ward 1 as a holistic community, a community of interest. I don't know if we've received direct feedback from constituents, but that's certainly something that I've heard on many occasions, and would like to keep that intact as one community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Arias. Any other council members wishing to speak at this point? City Manager Clegg?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, if I may provide some summarization, I think, of the feedback that we have received. And I'll go a little bit in maybe reverse order as it's reflected in my notes. I think, Councilmember Arias, I understand the request for 3 VRAs that keeps downtown intact, MLK Lakeview intact, and looks at a contiguity for Ward 3. I would note with that request, we'll do our best. One of the challenges that we face is because of some of those county pockets, both north of the city, but also in the middle, like Bell Terrace and those other areas, that there are limited areas in which to move wards if we hold true to each of those desired outcomes. But we'll do our best on that last piece. Beyond that, I feel like there is several consistent pieces of feedback about the river as a notable geographic boundary. I think that's consistent with the criteria for redistricting that we look at geographically easily understandable boundaries. And so I think between map 1 and map 2A, taking a look at some of the areas along the river that still would get us within a level of deviations that makes more sense. I think that the feedback about maintaining communities of interest related to downtown is consistent with 2A or 1 with some adjustments to those levels of deviation. And then I think I sense an opportunity to do a little bit of follow-up with Councilmember Parlier related to the feedback on public submission number 3 that I think could potentially be consistent with 1A and 1 and 2A, but takes into account that piece of feedback related towards 7. So I think we can come back with a map that is close to 1 and 2A with some of these adjustments and considerations, and we can also come back with a map.
You keep saying 1. Do you mean A?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Councilmember. I do mean A. So map A and 2A that make some of these adjustments, but then also have an alternative based on the criteria outlined by Councilmember Arias. So I think we would be coming back to council with 2 considerations for this. To go back to the feedback that Ms. Carrier provided to the council on the timing as we started this public hearing, we are targeting to have a final recommended map for March 16th. So we're going to work with our consultants to bring something back as early as next week's meeting on March 2nd so that we can get some feedback on those revisions to ensure that they're in the direction that council is desiring, so we can still make some adjustments based on additional feedback we get on March 2nd prior to March 16th.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I don't see any other requests at this point, and so, sorry. Do you want to comment on redistricting? Redistricting? No. Okay, so we will then move on to the next item. Madam Clerk?